Hey guys, Tom Barclay here. Just going to do a video on the pre-Doncaster press conference with Thomas Frank, which, usually Carabao Cup against lower league opposition, what is there going to be to talk about that's going to be that interesting, you might think. But actually, there were loads of things that were interesting. I mean, even before I went into it, I thought, well, compared to how it's going in the league, which is obviously fantastic, there's not a lot of talking points generally at the moment. That's what I thought ahead of the Brighton game. But maybe with a League Cup, talk about Matisse Tell, talk about Wilson Odobert, Antonin Kinski, and all those players came up, players who were trying to make their case to get into the first 11. But actually, the press conference, the main line was dominated by one Harry Kane. Now, all of this comes from a bit of talk in the last day or so about Harry Kane potentially being available at the end of this season for 56.7 million. He's believed to have a release clause in his deal at Bayern Munich, which means that if by the end of the winter window, so in January or February, whenever it runs on to, I'm not sure for this one, it was February this year, for example, if he basically indicates that he wishes to leave in the summer, it is believed that then he will have a clause that comes into effect in the summer at Bayern Munich. And with Tottenham understood to have first refusal on him, which basically means if someone makes a bid, they get the chance to make a similar amount offer and get first refusal on him. Effectively a buyback clause, which Daniel Levy pretty much revealed in that fans forum a little while ago. They could bring him back. In theory, they could bring him back if Harry wants to bring him back or not. And I will come on to the story. I mean, there was some stuff that came out in Bild in Germany, but I saw Matt Law yesterday followed it up, and he's done a really interesting piece involving sort of 5 points, 5 reasons why, as fanciful as it might seem, Kane coming back to Spurs, 5 points over why it actually might not be as fanciful as you think. And I'll come on to that in a minute, but let's start with Thomas Frank's comments on it, because I thought, and lots of other people did as well, that this was quite a talking point, even if it's a bit of a hypothetical one. And so I asked the question in the embargoed section of the press conference about Kane. In fact, it was my colleague Matt Law of the Daily Mail who asked the first one about it, and I followed it up. Basically made a pretty simple question to Thomas. Would you like to see him back if a deal could be done? And I have to say his answer was a much more interesting answer, a much better answer for newspapers at least, than I was expecting. Now, I'll leave it up to you as Spurs fans, how much you're getting excited by this particular line, or whether you think it's just kind words from Thomas Frank, respectful words, or whether you don't think it's actually going to be possible. We'll see. Anyway, this is what he said when I asked that question. If a deal can be done, would you like to see him back at Tottenham? And he said, there's a lot of Tottenham fans, including myself, who would like to see Kane back. He's a top player. Personally, I don't think he will do it right now, if I'm honest. He'll probably stay in Bayern and continue performing well. He was top scorer last year and won the championship. He's doing fantastic now. I don't know what he's thinking. Myself, I'm a traveller. I like to travel, I like to explore things as well. He's been here for many years, so why not enjoy the time at Bayern a little bit more? But he's welcome. If he wants to join us, he's more than welcome. Which was definitely more than I was expecting when I asked that question to get out of Frank. One might argue that sometimes when a deal might actually be in the offing, managers become a bit more what you might call tight-lipped over things. Whereas if they're a bit more sort of open like that, would suggest that there isn't a chance of it. I mean, when you go through it again, even though he says, he's been more than welcome to come, love to see him back, which is really encouraging, he does effectively say that he doesn't think it's going to happen. Though he does say right now, obviously can't even move right now, but I guess if he's talking about the nearest window, I couldn't see him moving in the winter either. But it was interesting. So let's talk about Matt's story. So 5 reasons why he's going. I'm not going into every single one. Just go and check that out on the Telegraph website if you want to read about that specifically. But so some of the points he made were, one of them was that Daniel Levy is gone. Now, whilst Kane did show his respect for Daniel Levy when Levy left, calling him a great chairman, it's no sort of secret that he wasn't best pleased with the so-called gentleman's agreement being broken over the Man City deal, which didn't happen back in 2022. There was also some stuff about how he wasn't the way the deal was done with Bayern Munich, the way him and his family were treated. He apparently wasn't a huge fan of it. I won't go into more detail on that. But also, what was very interesting in the article was that Vivian Lewis, who's now obviously calling the shots, the daughter of Joe Lewis, calling the shots at Spurs now as the sort of most prominent, along with her brother Charlie, member of the Lewis family, controlling Tottenham, is that apparently she is quite close to Harry, to the point where when Harry and his wife did a gender reveal party over Zoom during COVID in 2020 for their third child, Viva, she's known, was one of the few people actually on the call for that gender reveal party. So that would suggest that they are pretty close. Also, Harry's apparently his favourite holiday destination is in the Bahamas, in an area where the Lewis family own. Not surprisingly, what a lovely destination. Not I've been, but I've seen pictures. It looks great. And obviously, we've got this first refusal situation with Spurs having it. So there are a lot of reasons why there is a possibility that it could happen. He signed a 4-year contract when he joined Bayern Munich from Spurs back in 2023. I don't believe there's an option for another year from speaking to people in Germany, but I could be wrong. Hasn't really been any sort of suggestion, I think, from the Bayern end. So come next summer, when he will be turning 33, but I do honestly believe with Harry's fitness, having watched him a lot for England of late, and obviously when you watch Bayern, he still looks like he'd be a great investment for any Premier League club for the next 3 or 4 years. Just look at Lewandowski and Barcelona, and a similarity, I think, with Kane. And so he'll be coming into his last year of his contract if he hasn't signed a new one. And there's been no talk, really, in the media, at least, of another contract being on offer, despite having scored 98 goals for Bayern in 103 games. He will break the record for the fastest to 100 goals if he scores twice in his next game. Ronaldo did it in 105 for Real Madrid. So that just underlines what an unbelievable player he's become at Bayern Munich. He's obviously a fantastic player at Spurs, but this season what's been really interesting with Kane, particularly in this short spell when he's been absolutely prolific, but he's also been dropping deeper at times. Now that Musiala's unfortunately got injured, he's been playing even more of a linking man. He just looks like an even better player than he was at Tottenham, albeit you could argue the Bundesliga is maybe not quite as strong as the Premier League, but still he's been brilliant. But obviously the idea of coming back to the Premier League gives him the chance to break Alan Shearer's record, 260 Premier League goals. He's on 213, so it's 48 to break it. That is not nothing, particularly at that age. I mean, the way he's going now, he could break that in 2 seasons, but 24 goals in the Premier League campaign is not easy. You have to do it twice. So he needs to give himself some time if he wants to do it. That's presuming that he definitely wants to do it, because I remember before the Bayern move came about, people I was speaking to very much suggested that the Premier League record was a massive thing for Kane, and yet he moved anyway. So I'm second guessing myself on how important that is to him. There's also the fact that he's winning things at Bayern. He's the main man there. Spurs, I feel, almost have quite a lot to prove, particularly in this year, if they are to somehow to be able to attract him back. From a sort of winner's perspective, he spent so much time of his career scoring loads of goals but not winning anything, as much as Spurs means so much to him. I do think there is that. My hunch, and I haven't read anything about this or I haven't sort of heard anything about this behind the scenes, but I do wonder about Barcelona, because Robert Lewandowski's 37 now. The fact that they signed Lewandowski in the first place, obviously from Barcelona, suggests that they are open to signing an older centre forward, and he's just the obvious replacement in the way that Kane was the replacement for Lewandowski at Bayern. And a lot of people when he moved to Bayern sort of questioned, just like Michael Owen vocalised recently, how is it that much of an achievement to go to Bayern and win the Bundesliga? I don't think they'd be saying the same thing if he went to Barcelona. So I do wonder about that, but that's just my personal opinion, not based on anything I've heard. If it is to be the Premier League, there don't seem to be a load of options. You think with Man City, unless they suddenly think they can play him with Haaland, you think Haaland's sort of got that locked down from a centre-forward perspective. Same goes with Liverpool, with Isak. They've got enough problems as it is with Ekitike and Isak, so I can't see Liverpool. You would think, definitely should have had some water before. Okay, quick sip. Right, apologies for that. With Arsenal, surely that's a non-starter, even though he actually started his career as a very young player at Arsenal. Surely that's off limits. I don't think Chelsea's out of the question in terms of the crossing the rivalry, crossing the sort of divide in London. It felt like that was a possibility of that years ago. But they've obviously got Pedro, they've got Delap. I don't know. They don't really sign older players. Newcastle maybe, but would they be fighting for honours enough? Them selling Isak seems like a bit of a statement to a lot of players out there. They're not quite up at the top table. And then after that, Man United just signed Šeško, and just look at what they're doing. After that, there aren't that many Premier League options. Tottenham makes a lot of sense. I mean, Solanke, I think there's still jury's out. I still think he's a really good player on his day, but he's had injury problems. He's not prolific. I still think you take Kane, maybe have the two of them. Mwani's only a loan. Richarlison's had a really good start to the season, but his injury situation and the fact he's getting older, I don't think it's even a question whether you'd have Kane over Richarlison. So there is all that. That makes a lot of sense. One thing that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, personally, is Harry Kane's on about 400 grand a week at Bayern Munich. And even though, presumably, in his next contract that he signs at a club, it's probably going to be for a bit less. Although you could argue he's playing it out of his skin now, so maybe it should be more. But just given that he'll presumably be looking for a few years on this next deal, and he's getting older, but it won't be much less, I doubt. And can Spurs really compete at that kind of price bracket? They certainly couldn't before. Now Daniel Levy's gone, the question marks will be like, are they spending more on wages? But you got to wonder, as much as some people might have put the blame, if you want to put it as blame, others might put it as shrewd business. But if you want to put the responsibility, I suppose, on the way Tottenham have gone about wages in the last however many years on Levy, I mean, they're still being signed off by the same family. All right, different members now. Maybe they will be looking to open the purse strings a bit more on wages, but there's a big difference between going around the 200 grand a mark. I don't know what Romero's on, but I do know that when Xavi Simons was in the conversation about a transfer, I heard he was asking for looking for around 200 grand a week when Chelsea were interested. I don't know if Tottenham went to that figure. Maybe it didn't quite work out that way. Maybe it's less. Maybe there's clauses, whatever. But say it is £200,000 a week. That's basically half of what Harry earns now. That's a big jump. Can Spurs really do it? Maybe it'd be a massive sign of intent, and what a signing it would be. He'd be box office. He's a brilliant player. Talk about getting the not so new owners, but the sort of new era, in getting the fans completely behind it. He would be the ideal signing, wouldn't he? But I still think there's quite a few question marks there, if there's even the legit legs for this. And whilst Frank gave some really nice words today, maybe that's all they were, nice words, because he knows it's a very unlikely deal. I don't know. One to watch, definitely. And I wish I'd followed it up actually with a question over that could Spurs even afford this kind of transfer? Definitely had the PSR headroom, but that's such a leap in wages. But if you're going to break the bank for one player, why not be the greatest player who's ever played for Tottenham? In a lot of people's opinion, my opinion from the football I've seen, 280 goals, definitely the record scorer. But let's see. Anyway, what else do we have to talk about? Another question that came up in the embargo section, and another my questions, and I'm not trying to pick myself up here. It's just something that I brought up, was Fabio Paratici, who has had a bad week, I suppose, in the sense that he's been given an 18-month suspended jail sentence as part of a plea bargain with Italian prosecutors. This all leads back to the financial malpractice scandal at his former club Juventus, of which he was a heavy part of. And without sort of raking over the situation of it, basically involved sort of inflated transfer fees, or basically involved transfers and players not going for prices that they should have gone for. And it's what led to his 30-month worldwide ban from FIFA. It's what led to him having to resign as managing director of football back in 2023 at Tottenham. And yet he has been on Spurs' books as a consultant for quite a long time now, definitely over the transfer window. There seem to be some sort of question marks over whether he's definitely coming back, because I remember writing back in the summer that before Ange had left, and I do believe he was a big part of the search for Thomas Frank for a new manager, and obviously transfers as well, that Paratici would be coming back in a formal capacity. He's obviously been a consultant over the transfer window. That at the moment seems to be some doubt over what is going to happen on that front. He's still definitely at the club as a consultant, but whether he comes back permanently in the wake of not only just this news, which obviously if he does, it doesn't put Spurs in a good light, given he's got an 18-month suspended jail sentence for this, but also the fact that Daniel Levy has left, and Levy and Paratici were sort of known to be big allies. So him going, does that change things? We wait to see. But I did ask Frank not about his the situation involving Paratici's sentence. I didn't think that was probably fair, but I do think it is fair to get a sense of how he works with Paratici. I think fans are wondering what Paratici's role actually is. Like, how does it work? And to be fair to Frank, he said he's obviously a consultant. He does speak to him. He spoke to him mostly during the transfer window, for obvious reasons regarding targets. He says he has a good relationship with him. So we wait to see what happens with Paratici and whether he does come back permanently, particularly after this and after Levy's gone. I don't know, but it was interesting to get some thoughts from Frank about working with Paratici, even if it was quite brief. I don't think he's been asked about it before then. I certainly haven't asked, and I don't think he's come up in the press conferences that I have been involved in, which is pretty much all of them. Right, so there's obviously a game tomorrow, or today, if I'm probably putting this out in the early morning of Wednesday. Doncaster at home in the Carabao Cup, obviously a competition that Spurs went very far in last season, arguably to their detriment in the Premier League. Andrew probably would argue that case, and I think he often made the point afterwards that after they went out and obviously got thumped by Liverpool in that second leg, there was no credit given for getting that far, of which, to be fair, they beat Man City, beat Man United, and did beat Liverpool in the first leg. But that's the way it goes with the Carabao Cup. It's one of these weird competitions where I don't think really much stock is given at all. Maybe if you reach the final, but not anything else. And yet, obviously, fans, particularly Tottenham fans, maybe less so now after winning last season, or maybe more in the Europa League, have put a lot of stock in. I know Marcus Buckland over on our Tottenham Way pod, winds him up no end when Spurs either go out early doors in the Carabao Cup, and often as a result of playing a weakened team, the manager playing a weakened team like we had Fulham a few years ago. Just on that point about the Tottenham Way, you guys on YouTube obviously watch this. A lot of you are probably already aware of this, because I've noticed some of the commenters on the Tottenham Way YouTube channel are some familiar faces. So hi to you guys, by the way. But if you aren't aware, please go to @the Tottenham Way pod on YouTube and check out all our stuff we do. We've now put in the podcast now on YouTube, along with a lot of sort of fun little shorts. We've got some great guys on there. Marcus, I know he can be a bit of a Marmite character for some of the Spurs fan base, but I think he's brilliant. It brings us a fan perspective. And then there's the three journalists. It used to be my good friend Dan Kirkpatrick, who I know to a lot of you Aussie fans, his name's a bit like mud after Clowngate, but he is a great guy and a really good journalist. But he's now at the Athletic, so he can't be on The View from the Lane and the Tottenham Way. So we have had our own fantastic transfer this summer. So along with myself, Tom Allnut of the Times, we now have George Sessions of Press Association, who you might well recognise his voice a lot from the end often of the open section of the press conferences, obviously with Ange before and now with Frank. He got some brilliant questions. He's a Spurs fan himself, unlike me, and has a sort of forensic knowledge of Spurs generally. So he has some really good opinions, but just a really lovely guy as well. So I think people will like him a lot, along with the other guys as well. So please go to the Tottenham Way pod on YouTube to check that stuff out. But anyway, what were we saying? So back to Doncaster. Yeah, it feels like off the back of the Europa League victory and this now desire, before it was an obsession to win a trophy, but now I imagine everyone's got a taste for it. And I think George, actually, talking about him the Tottenham way, he framed it perfectly. Like, yes, fans want Spurs to do well in the league, but I think they take winning the Carabao Cup or the FA Cup every day of the week over coming fifth, for example, in the Premier League. Because it's what matters. We saw it with the parade. Just winning trophies is what it means. And Spurs have got an opportunity here. First of all, they've got a really, really favourable draw at home to kick it off with. Doncaster lower league opposition, there's really no excuse to be going out. Obviously, don't take them lightly, but there's no excuse for going out against Doncaster at home. And they can really do something here. I think Thomas Frank's got quite a lot to prove. Just generally, obviously, coming into a club having not won a trophy, but he's particularly in the Carabao Cup and the domestic cups in England, admittedly with a club like Brentford most of the time, who aren't sort of expected to go really deep in these competitions, but he has gone out early a lot. So I hope he can change that at Spurs. I still expect him to rotate his team massively. I think there's license for that here. We're all going to look stupid if they end up losing at home to Doncaster with 11 changes. But I think even with 11 changes, they should have a good enough team to do that. Others, might push back on that. Might get a bit of heat from you guys who think you should never take lightly any team in this competition. But I think that's what's going to happen. He's basically said to us that he's going to rotate. I think he said that in one of his answers. So what does that mean? Who might we see? So first of all, I can tell you who we're not going to see. We're not going to see Ben Davies. He's got a minor injury. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but he's out. I think it might be a knee. Kyle Moani hasn't recovered from his dead leg in time. There's no Bissouma. Seems to be no particular date on when he might come back. It's interesting with Frank, with injuries. He seems to be quite reticent to put any timeframes or even go, to give any indication really over lengths of injuries. I know Ange copped a lot of heat last season for saying players might come back and then they don't. I do actually feel some sympathy with him at times, because compared to other managers, and Frank is a case in point, at times I feel like he did try and reveal a bit more to the fan over things like this and just got burnt by it sometimes, by things not happening in time or as to be expected. There were a lot of issues behind the scenes when it came to injuries. But Frank, he was asked about Kulusevski, and he really had to be pushed to confirm that he didn't think there's a good chance he'll be back before the end of the year. But initially, when he was asked about Kulusevski, he said he wouldn't be fit for tomorrow, but he can't be any more specific than that. So I think fans generally with Thomas don't expect much when it comes to updates on injuries, I would say. Although having said that, he did say that Solanke and Kota Takai, the new centre-back from Japan, were in full training today being Tuesday, which is exciting because they have both been doing individual training of late. He did rule out Solanke featuring against Doncaster the other day, so unless something's changed, I still would not expect him, or to be honest, Takai to be in the squad, but let's see. And like I say, no Bissouma, no update on exactly when he might be back. He did confirm that Antonin Kinski will start in goal. And I think this is an interesting talking point, actually, Kinski, because I think Vicario, as much of a big character in the dressing room, that goes a long way, and a good shot stopper as he is, I do think he has some frailties, and they have consistently come up. I still don't rate, to be honest, really highly his distribution. Every game, even under Frank at times, I feel like there is a poor pass that comes out. He really could do with improving on that. And then when it comes to his shot stopping, he had made a bit of a mistake against Brighton, didn't he? That Yassin Ayari strike was a good hit, but Frank himself admitted afterwards that Vicario beat kicking himself. So it's not like I'm expecting Kinski, even if he comes in and has an absolute blinder against Doncaster, which, let's be honest, it's unlikely Doncaster's going to have. It's unexpected, at least, that Doncaster have that many shots, really. So he probably won't have that much of a chance to shine. But if he does somehow, I still don't think that's going to shift the dial enough for him to Vicario to be dislodged straight away. But I don't think it's like Vicario's on rock solid ground long term if he keeps having some of these performances. And Kinski is highly rated enough that if his development goes like this, goes up, then who's to say that he couldn't dislodge Vicario one day? I mean, to be fair to Kinski, he was starting regularly for Slavia Prague before he came, which obviously is a different level to Spurs, but is a good team, champions over there, top European football qualification for them. So anyway, big chance for him. Who, let's remember, Kinski came in last January. He was brilliant on his debut against Liverpool in that first leg that I referenced earlier, where they won 1-0, clean sheet. Clean sheet against Tamworth, that might not sound that impressive, but away from home, there's a lot of high balls he had to deal with. And then after that, I think he sort of struggled after that. He in the games that he played in, wasn't great at Liverpool away. I'd say he's particularly not good against Villa away when they lost 2-1, but it could have been a lot more. And he actually made a few good saves in that game, but he conceded the first one, from what I remember, very poorly. So there are obviously things that he needs to work on. But anyway, he's going to get his big chance against Doncaster to get back in the team, get his first appearance under Frank in competitive football. Who else might we see? I think maybe this is quite a relatively big game for Tel and Odebear. Wouldn't be surprised if Tel starts up front. Quite a big game for Johnson, to be honest. In fact, that's the three that I'm sort of expecting. Tel to play centre forward, Johnson wide right, Odebear wide left. Odebear was promising, was the way that I asked particularly Frank about Tel and Odebear. He said both of them are very exciting very good players going forward. Because I've just noticed some fans getting their patience wearing a bit thin with the two of them. They know that they're only 20, but they didn't come for insignificant fees. And I suppose the argument against them at times has been what they could have bought instead, whether it be put more money towards combining it with another amount of money that they've spent elsewhere. Maybe the two of them together buy a £60 million player. And it's never as simple as this. But then putting the price they put together. But they are expecting a little bit more from both of them, fans. It seems, not everyone, but some seem to be expecting a bit more by now. And I don't think that's unreasonable. But there's also the caveat to say, you can't write them off yet. They are only 20. But this is the kind of game where they really could do with a big confidence booster. Odebear try and really dominate that left-hand side. Tel get a couple of goals maybe, and not just from the penalty spot. That would really help. So let's see what they can do. I'm expecting those two up top, along with Johnson, who had a really good start to the season goals-wise, but now seems to have been a bit more on the bench of late, particularly since Xavi Simons has come in to play left wing. Kudus obviously got the right wing lockdown, so this is a chance for them to stake their claim. Also, the other point is about some of the youngsters. So first of all, one of the youngsters, Damola Ajayi, is a Tottenham player, but he's also a Doncaster player. He's on loan at Doncaster. Little known rule that people might not be aware of, that players who go on loan and play against their parent club in the Carabao Cup can play against their parent club. You can't do that in the Premier League, but you can do it in the Carabao Cup so long as the parent club give the authorization for that to happen. Spurs have done that with Ajayi, so there is the potential for their own player to knock them out, I suppose. I don't think many people were expecting that, but Ajayi so far at Doncaster, he has had a pretty good. He's been involved a lot. I don't think he started that many Premier League games, but he did score in a fantastic last round win for Doncaster at Middlesbrough. Bear in mind, Middlesbrough are really going strong in the Championship. And they won 4-0 away at Middlesbrough in the last round to set up this tie against Tottenham. Ajayi, you'll remember hopefully well from the Elfsborg game. He was one of the three youngsters, along with Dane Scarlett and Mikey Moore, to grab their first goal in that late 3-0 win against Elfsborg, which confirmed safe passage to the knockouts of the Europa League. A great night for Tottenham, as Ange put it, in terms of the academy. Anyway, a couple of other youngsters who might be involved from a Spurs perspective, probably not starting, but maybe on the bench, are Junai Byfield, the centre-back, who I remember seeing come on against Luton. He looked a pretty technically good footballer. So he might well be involved, particularly with giving some of the other centre-backs a rest. And then Luca Williams-Barnett, who's still only 16, was on the bench at Galatasaray, being only 15 last year, still a schoolboy, But there's a lot of excitement about this kid in the academy. A number 10 by trade, but if he does feature, he could feature anywhere. But he's had an electric start to the under-21 so far this season. 6 goals, 4 assists in just 6 under-21s games so far, including a 39-minute hat-trick against Leicester on Friday. Frank has already talked about, he was asked about him today, and he was talking about his, how he's very excited about him, likes what he sees, was talking him up basically. So be interesting to see if he gets on the bench, which I would not be surprised, and B, if he can somehow get his debut. That would be really exciting. So that's about it. Let's just round it up with a bit of a likely lineup. So Kinski in goal, obviously. I would have thought Ben Davies definitely would have started this game. He's obviously injured, so there's a bit of a question mark for Frank, what he does at fullback. Obviously, Ange last season definitely would have played Archie Gray there, but I don't get the sense that, I think Frank's reluctant to. I think he sees him as a central midfielder, and I'm sure Archie wants to be playing central midfield, and I think he's likely to start as central midfield in this game. So I imagine it will probably be, written down here, Spence and Udogie, but obviously Udogie featured quite heavily at Brighton, having just come back from injury. But it does feel like a time to give Porro a rest. You can guarantee Spence will definitely play, but maybe Spence and Udogie to start. Udogie come off at half time, maybe. We'll see. But it's a bit of a, could be anything. Kevin Danzo surely plays. Radu Dragozin, we didn't ask about him, to be fair. We should have probably. But for example, when we went to open training, the first 15 minutes anyway, of open training ahead of the Villarreal game, because that's when we get to go and watch the first 15 minutes of training ahead of Champions League European games. Dragozin was involved at the start and then went off to effectively do his own thing. So I still think he's a bit way away. I think they're being very cautious with him coming back from an ACL. So I'd be surprised. So that really leaves not a lot for it to not be Romero or Van de Ven, one of. But, with Van de Ven's history, but then Romero's history, but particularly Van de Ven's history, it feels like more likely to be the captain. And Danzo, and Udogie and Spence. I think that's probably quite a reasoned, calculated gamble. I'd be surprised, would not be surprised if that was correct. In midfield, I think it might be the 3 youngsters. I think it'll be Gray, Bergvall and Sarr. I think Gray's due a start. Sarr has started every single game so far, but didn't start at Brighton, so I imagine he comes back in. Sarr man. And then Bergvall didn't have his best game at Brighton, but I think keeping that momentum going could see him start here as well. But you would not be surprised also if it was Bentancur or Bissouma for a bit more experience. But this feels like our chance to really give those 3 guys a go in what feels like the future of Tottenham's midfield. And then I've already mentioned the 3 up top. I imagine Johnson wide right, Tal through the middle, Odegaard wide left. That's my plan. Anyway, let me know, guys. What do you think? What do you think about the idea of Harry Kane coming back? Are you excited that it feels like there's an actual chance of this happening, or is it just some nice words from Frank? Do you think it's more likely he ends up after all this signing a new contract at Bayern, or goes to another English team, or Barcelona? That's my hunch that could be a chance of that. But again, not based on anything. I just feel like it makes a lot of sense to me. What do you think about Paratici? What do you think about Damola Ajayi being able to maybe inflict an embarrassing evening on Spurs? Can't see it happening, but you never know. Anyway, love to hear your thoughts as always. Cheers, guys.